All right, my babies, the second video of the day. Resistance. My friend telling me how she for 7 years refused to move forward, but refused to be harsh on our on ourselves, on herself. Okay, so here, it's funny. I actually remember this conversation. It's funny. I was hanging out with her today, and we were debating friendships, and I wrote a note about it. Let me read the note that's gonna come after like 50 videos or something. Considering someone a friend doesn't mean it's a friendship, but that's a future note to consider. But so resistance. My friend telling me how she, for 7 years, refused to move forward in her company, but refused to be harsh on herself. While she was saying that she refused to move forward, she refused to be like, again, like it's the harshness, right, that I'm highlighting, but I'm remembering the actual conversation. Like I was kind of being like, you have to admit that what you did was not really to your best interest. And she just wouldn't do that because she said, her words was, I don't want to be harsh on myself. Isn't being harsh on yourself just the feeling you get from taking responsibility? It's fair if you disagree. But for me, once you feel like you're harsh on yourself, that means you're truly owning up to the responsibility of what happened. So the highlight is resistance, right? Here you go. Resistance. A friend telling me how she, for 7 years, refused to move forward with her company, but still refused to be harsh on herself. And at one point around that conversation, I started feeling bad. But I assume when when somebody is taking responsibility to kind of like be the devil's advocate, you really have to like stick to the nail that you hammered. And the reason I'm saying that is because the worst thing that you see in a piece of wood is a nail, is a hole basically that was supposed to serve a purpose but now doesn't, because it ruins the wood. And throughout my talking to people over the past 18 years, man, no, 21. Over the past 21 years, I kind of realized that calling people out and pointing something out, or and by point the calling people out is like to kind of like point the finger at the things that you see, which one way or another is judgment. But pointing something out is kind of isolating one thing, because once what we do normally as human beings is we tend to kind of like start running around something that's uncomfortable. And I want you to imagine the time where somebody asked you a question and you didn't really answer because you probably don't want to, or whatever the case. And effectively what you did was you kind of like use that to relate to something else. And then basically the whole conversation shifts to something new. And so I was kind of like holding that conversation down anytime she'd kind of try to say something positive. And I really think positivity is very toxic. Positivity is toxic. Being positive isn't. Positivity is toxic. Because you could always take anything and see the positive in it. You can always. It's not always something that makes sense, but I think that we should always look and see what positive comes out of it. It's been taught in Buddhism, it's been taught in Islam, Christianity, Judaism, like all religions, all sects, everything that kind of like revolves around the spirit, revolves around our attitude towards the world. And so her resistance very much kind of like I was looking at it, I was like, you have to say it. You have to say it. And then she'd change the conversation. I'd say, you have to say it. Until she was like, I refuse to be harsh on myself. And I was like, are you really being harsh on yourself? Or are you just kind of like out loud accepting that you kind of could have done things differently? It's only a mistake if we're refusing to do anything about it, right? But as I was like sitting with her and having a conversation with her, technically it was an official meeting. It becomes an official meeting with me, right? Because every single time like something pops up, I kind of like go into this whole like, this is what I do mode. So it's like her resistance drew a different picture to me because you're already changing and you're already moving towards change and trying your best to do things differently. Yet you're resisting the fact that the reason you're doing things differently is because something was wrong in the past. And again, it's the harshness on herself that she kept reflecting on. And for me, it's just a waste of energy, right? I don't know. It's like you kind of have a fire that's burning for no fucking reason. And it's not like you're cooking on it. It's not like you're using it for heat. It's just burning. You're wasting wood. And I felt like once you kind of like this resistance is always there because it's the same resistance that allowed you not to move. Now it's the resistance that's kind of saying, but I did nothing wrong. Nobody's saying you did something wrong. We're just saying take responsibility for what you did because you're trying to do something different. And approaching something different literally means you have to let go of what you did before. And the way I see letting go is to kind of like accept that the new thing works better than the old one. Again, we can debate whether the old thing made sense at the time or not, or whether it was a survival instinct or not. Like, it doesn't fucking matter. Just, you kind of have to be courageous is not the word. Strong is not the word. Humble. Yes. I think resistance does come from arrogance because you kind of believe that nothing's going to happen. Like, you kind of believe that you're right, or you kind of believe that you can't be wrong. And again, I'm not saying you're right or you're wrong. I'm saying like we're trying to do things differently. And so moving forward requires us to actually say yes to it. And the resistance showed a different form, showed a different approach to the responsibility that we avoided taking throughout that time. Again, like it's not her. Right now, I am thinking what could possibly have been the case and how it applies to me in many ways that I actually like consider the world and how my own resistance reveals itself, right? Because the goal is for me to process out loud the things that become an unconscious thing with me, or process out loud what I want to be an unconscious habit. Because I'm guiding the rhetoric as I'm actually explaining it to myself to something that makes sense and is comfortable for me to accept for now so that I can take a step forward and further, forward and forward. And just flow, right? Like you flow and there's no resistance. And ultimately, once you see how you're resisting, that's when you kind of like start devising things differently, maybe. Super fucking beautiful. So my friend is telling me how I remember the conversation like vividly. What is it about resistance, man, that allows us to like dive into the investment of its energy? Is Does resistance always present itself as resistance, or is it arrogance? At first, it was like arrogance or if absent-mindedness, maybe, like because you clearly did not notice that whatever is happening is not really working until the environment changes enough for you to kind of like realize, hey man, like, this needs to be done. This needs to change. And I had a video a couple of times, a couple of weeks back. It's about basically you either approach discipline in a way where you're sacrificing things you want, or you end up self-sacrificing for the sake of things later on. And I discussed it in a way is like you either change willingly or through traumatic events. Now, the last thing you want is a traumatic event to happen and you not accept that it happened. And worse, the last thing you want is for an event to happen, for you to start actually having to change because of it, and not accept what led to it happening. because it's literally a trail. It's your timeline. It's literally like thing after thing after thing after thing, and eventually it leads to this traumatic event becoming a more and more and more kind of like. And again, when we're talking about business, because me and my friend we're discussing about her business and how she was approaching it for a while and how it shifted and changed and all this stuff. But as we are approaching, like when it comes to ourselves, don't we do that all the fucking time? And applications go from you yourself to like the businesses you do to the activities you do. There are always certain points where we become very much arrogant about how we're approaching things to a point where we no longer kind of like consider what's happening underneath. And then eventually something collapses or explodes or just kind of like starts squeaking. And our strength becomes when we notice and how soon we notice. And if anything, my favorite conversation when it comes to the business world was literally, forgot who said it, but it is often in times of peace when we need to prepare for change. It's often in times of peace where we need to prepare for change. Simply because when things are moving smoothly, we change is universal, man. When things are moving smoothly, that means whatever change is happening is not impacting them. But at one point it will. And so it's often in times of peace where we prepare for change. I guess we would notice our own personal resistance to the world around us, and we'll have time to notice it if we were aware or if we wanted to be aware. More when things are working without our efforts. Isn't that flow though? Does that mean that flow states have to be balanced in a certain kind of way? Huh, it's a video.